California.
Yes, California has just signed a bill. They put together the first, I guess, reparations committee, you would say, the first reparations committee to actually figure out how to pay out and who would get reparations. And of course, the first word that has come down has brought a storm along with it, because they have started making some specifics finally. Because, as we always have the reparations conversation, the first thing that the opposition says is who would get it. There's too many variables and factors. So they said, okay, well, let's start with the most basic: descendants of enslaved people and descendants of free people post 1900. Sounds like, that kind of makes sense, right? Well, the Black immigrants of California are not happy with that. There's about 175,000 Black immigrants who would not be able to benefit from that. But one of the reasons that they wanted to make it lineage based and base it on this, for one, they couldn't do all Black people in California, because one, that would kill it before it got started. But also because if you do all Black people in California, it would be deemed unconstitutional under Prop 209. So
Could you explain that a little bit? What's Prop 209?
So Prop 209 is basically Prop 209 is kind of an extension of the 14th Amendment. Mm-hmm. So how we always say, well, certain things you can't do a blanket just for Black folks. Mm-hmm. So you have to do
like around who are underrepresented, right? Yeah, right. Like the Farmers of Color bill that
exactly.
They had.
Exactly, you have to use very specific language, so it can't be, you can't sue for unconstitutionality. Mm-hmm. So that's what's going on with the bill and the way they're trying to do it. They're trying to do it to where if we say it's lineage based, which, because you have a precedence for that when you talk about Jewish folks and you talk about the Japanese folks who got money from the concentration camps, it's lineage based. So it's not a blanket statement, it's lineage based, so you can make it a clear cut thing of the people who get paid. And that way it can't be, it'll be harder to challenge it by making it lineage based in a blanket of all Black Californians. And then also another reason you don't want to make it just all Black Californians, because if you do that, you do open the door for the people of color to kind of edge in to trying to get that, right? Like
I have 2% Nigerian in my 23andMe.
Exactly. So that's the thing that they're trying to avoid. And they wanted to define it the way that Shirley Weber, the Secretary of State, she said she wanted it defined by lineage. That was her clear intent. And that's why they went into these talks, because they said they wanted to define it before it talk went any further. Let's define what it is, so it's not something arbitrary, and it's not something that you could poke holes in easily, because now you got something very specific. And people will say, like, well, would that leave my family out? Well, the statistics say 70 to 80% of Black Californians are descendants of enslaved people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and another thing, just in terms of California's history, even though California did not have legalized slavery, California actually was a safe haven for those slave owners and people involved in slavery. When they found out that, when it was apparent that the Confederacy was not going to win, and this institution was going to die, a lot of people left the South in the eastern states that had slavery and migrated to California. So this is why you had something like the what was it? It was like the Fugitive Slave Act in California, where they would return you if you were enslaved. And you had all of these bills, well, not all of these bills, but the climate in California in certain ways favored this new money that's coming in, this slave money that's coming in as well. Even though you didn't have legalized slavery, you had slavery nonetheless, as we know.
Absolutely.
So there were Black people who, there are several cases of Black people who come to California and actually are in a position where they're still slaves, right? They're still enslaved, and they are kept in, a system because they're coming from a slave state. But because they had no protections, they lived in these conditions. There are a couple of cases in which those ran away and were helped and then challenged it, but we haven't even talked about nor addressed that as well. I know when the bill first came out, and I have to let me acknowledge the A.D.O.S people that came onto and spoke with Ark Republic. One of the brothers was actually, he's from Mississippi but lives in Los Angeles, and he spearheads now. It's not called, it's a specific group, and he was a part of really championing for this reparations bill to pass and is really behind it. Forgot the brother's name, but Tiffany Quarles is somebody that I know from LA. She's a part of this as well. But also this also accounts for right after slavery, the Black people who were in California and had some level of enterprise and established themselves financially, who in the Jim Crow laws, right? The what do you call these? The de facto Jim Crow laws, the ones that they're not on the books, but they're totally
they call
practiced.
the new Jim Crow, like
redlining
and
right. Yeah, all that Sacramento, all that area, was largely owned by this Black man who lost his land. And even what we call today's Napa Valley, a woman by the name of Mary Pleasant was a Black woman who's very important in terms of kind of helping that wine region flourish, because she actually saved the only kind of winery at the time that had some in the mid 1800s that had some level of operations going on, and that was taken from her. And then also all of the lawsuits. There's a lot of lawsuits going on in the San Francisco region, because that Bay Area was predominantly Black for a minute. So there's a lot of lawsuits because there were segregationist laws in terms of public transportation and so on and so forth. So this reparations bill acknowledged like the subsequent things that happened after slavery. I'm sorry, that was long-winded, but so the idea is like race versus lineage. Mm-hmm. So the people who say that race should be considered, or the critique of lineage is that, well, you still can have white people still claim Black lineage, right? Because what we know, especially if you have people from Louisiana, my mother from Louisiana, I could talk about Louisianians. So there's a whole group of people that come out of South Louisiana that are, they pass for white, and they're called the Passe Blanc. And there's this secret group that are in California passing as white. And so what happens if one of their ancestors, who now is totally entrenched in white California, says, my great great grandfather, was Rufus Jones,
right.
or, sorry, Rufus Jeune from St. Martinville, right? So, but the theory is that you'll have less, perhaps, of an error, or the margin of error would be lessened if it's lineage versus race.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
That's because we know it's socially constructed, and
exactly.
You can take all these swabs and all this other stuff, and
it's too easy to manipulate it in that way. But if you make it lineage based, you have something concrete to stand on. And again, you don't want to mess with Prop 209, and Prop 209 is basically saying you can't use race, because they would use Prop 209 against you, right? When it was made, so the government couldn't use race, sex, ethnicity, or sexual orientation to not give you a job. Now they would turn around and use that as a precedent to say, well, since we can't use it to give people a job, we also cannot use that to give folks money.
Very good. Yeah, that's a very good analysis of that. I know California is like a template in terms of what possible reparations will look like. Oddly enough, I didn't know the new season of Atlanta was up, and they have this thing on reparations. I don't know if you saw it. It's hilarious.
Yes.
In terms of it, I know what is this? It gives like a lot of kind of thought-provoking thought-provoking content in this satirical comedic format, but nonetheless, this reparations is it's going to be very interesting.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Arc Republic. If you like what you see and you like what you hear, you can actually keep this mothership going. How? You can make a tax-deductible donation in several ways. One, Cash App us at Arc Republic Media. And you can also go on our website, arcrepublic.com/donate. As well, you can also donate to our fiscal sponsor and our sister organization at Black Farmers Index, that is Cash App, or also go onto their website, blackfarmersindex.com. We are two Black women-owned media organizations who share our profits so folk can thrive.
I think it's good because how you say California is a template of things that could be things that come in the rest of the nation. I think it's good that one is going past just the reparations conversation, because at first we knew, we was like, the first thing is to get the conversation to be had. And that started to be had. But now we're getting to the point where it's like, okay, now we can actually start locking down some concrete things.
Correct.
That can actually lead to reparations. Because I know at one point Bernie Sanders was like, I think reparations should be like free college for our Black folks, and like all these other ways to help change the economic base, which I wasn't totally against. But also, cash is king. Like, yo, right. all the people who built this country off of our backs and who are rich from it, they have cash. We should have, we should be able to partake in that, at least to the point where you can lift some Black folks out of poverty. And the other side of it, Kaya, was the people who don't want it to be lineage based. They kind of talk about, well, even if we weren't the direct descendants of slaves, we were still affected by redlining. We were still affected by gerrymandering. We were still affected by, like you said, the social construct of being Black. But so I think that's where the hiccup is now. But again, I think it's still going to lean, to me, it feels like, just for the constitutionality of it, it's still going to lean towards being lineage based.
Yeah. I mean, that's like somebody who wasn't in the internment camps and come to California from Japan 5 years after World War II and is demanding money for, being a Japanese person in California. It's the same. Yeah. It's the same thing. Unfortunately, right. I mean, well, fortunately, they didn't have that experience. Unfortunately, they carry a lot of the stigma, yet and still that experience is not connected or directly tied to them in that way. Another thing I want to say too, as well, is that there's a lot of other countries that are now vying for reparations. Jamaica, some countries, Jamaica, I would
Haiti.
Say,
I know Haiti is
right. Yeah. Haiti, the CARICOM, the Caribbean, which is like a Caribbean political and economic union or bloc. Several of they talk about reparations often, and they're pushing for that. And even some African countries have been talking about reparations and what that looks like. So these in-between people that are migrating to the States afterwards, I don't know, maybe perhaps they need to take the claims to the countries,
I just don't, like I said,
they're migrating from.
I would say, I just don't think the numbers will be big enough to change what needs to be done, right? Like I said, and I quoted it wrong. It wasn't 70 to 80%, it's 80 to 90% of Black Americans in California are direct descendants. So I think if 80 to 90 are direct descendants, that's enough to say this will probably be the best way and the most fair way to get reparations passed and to get reparations, something actually happening. And it's funny, I think a big piece of this legislation even came from that Black farmers
is it the Farmers of Color bill or the original Black Farmers bill? Because
the original Black Farmers bill.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, and so I think they're trying to get away from those things that made it have to turn into the Farmers of Color bill, right? I think they're trying to find ways, like, okay, we saw what happened when we tried to make it for the Black farmers. Everybody lost their damn mind, called it unconstitutional. Now I think they took that and said, okay, we'll make this template and we'll do it this way because this is a way to get around that, and it cannot be deemed unconstitutional.
Yeah, and what I enjoy about what's going on, because part of this is that there's a lot of more research and digging about the Black Californian experience and what happens, right? Because even though, because part of the pushback is that we didn't have slavery and we didn't have quote unquote Jim Crow. Yes, you did, California. Stop the bullshit. First of all, stop the bullshit. There were a lot of sundown towns in California.
Which goes into the next piece of the conversation we're going to have.
Okay,
really.
Yeah. All right. Which goes into the sundown towns all throughout California. Even Watts and Compton, were white, which speaks to the case of the Bruce family, who got some of their land back in Manhattan Beach in Los Angeles when it was taken. On the books, it says eminent domain, but the real story is that those people were run out by the KKK. Some of them were killed. It doesn't speak for the Allentown, which is a town outside of the LA County, which was an all-Black farming community that was very lucrative. White people poisoned their water and killed their animals and killed some of the people there. There's a lot of, we're not even talking about in LA up until roughly the 60s, you couldn't be on the West Side after dark and not be a butler or somebody that worked at a white home, because you would get stopped by the popos and would not make it to your house. Or if you did, your body was broken.
Yep.
There's a lot of segregationist policies. Even the whole busing thing that's coming in the 70s. Where Black kids were bussed out to the Valley, and the riots and the trauma that these kids endured when they were bussed out. I have a friend who talks about that a lot, how you had to fight every day when you were bussed out. So there's going to be a lot of great research that talks about it, that brings light to what happened to Black people and why Black people are leaving, why these communities are downsizing and decreasing, why in places like Compton, you talk to Hub City Dre, and places like Watts are so maligned. A couple of years ago, I read that they found munitions from, I don't know what war, that were like somewhere by the projects, and people wonder why they were getting sick. They had like dumped all of this old war stuff on the east side and built the projects there, right? Yep. So these are a lot of things that are going to come out, and we haven't talked about crack cocaine.
Right.
Let's bring it up.
Right.
And how that was strategically dumped and funneled
in our neighborhood.
In our neighborhoods.
Or even before you talk about crack cocaine, you talk about even the racism of how the freeways were built. Like there was literally racism because the freeways were built based on redlining and based on getting white folks to jobs and not getting Black folks to jobs.
Yeah, it was hell. I mean, as Cube said, LA is not all surf and sun, especially for Black people. A friend of mine, we were talking, and she said, that there was a lake in Watts. There was a lake. I said, really? She said, yeah, the lake got, I don't know what you do with the water, it got drained. So, we're looking into, I need to look more into that. But this talks about how Black communities were disrupted and reconfigured at the benefit of this white power structure. That is still in place, and whose descendants benefit and still are the benefactors of these structures. So yeah, and the Black people that migrate, for these wars. But we could go on and on about that. My apologies, I ride for the California conversation, because I think, we're so on the left of the coast. A lot of people don't understand all of the complicated nuances that go into what it's like to live in LA, to live in California, period. And it being like the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
Let's embark on the Ark Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times, to free the voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times, so all can build. Let's shine, yeah.